Well, good morning, Bear Nation. I'm Bear with BearIndependent.com. Yes, we're inside the pickup truck. Why? Because I felt like going for a drive at 4:30 this morning. Sometimes you got to do that. Why is the brief back on YouTube? Because, recon by fire. How's that for an answer? Bear Independent Brief, 20MAY22, Shalom White Fox. We're talking about Finlandia. I think that's their name. Oh, right, no, Finland. And NATO and inflation today. In world news, Finland and Sweden both are purveyors of fine melodic death metal and black metal, although they're basically total absolute heathens, and they're going to be bird food when we get around to Revelation 19. Sucks to be them, but also talented musicians. Finland and Sweden have both started the official process of applying to become part of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Though a traditionally neutral country, traditionally for the last 70 years neutral, actually sided with Germany during World War II. There was a little thing called the Winter War, and then the Continuation War, and then there was a third conflict after World War II, shortly after, I think 1946, in which I forget what they call it, but basically Finland expelled all the Nazis from their country. Although traditionally a neutral country for the last 70 years, Finnish leaders urged officials to immediately start the application process, saying it was vital for security. Russia responded to the reports. Good morning, Sergeant O'Reilly. Russia responded to the reports, quote, Finland's entry into NATO will become a threat to Russia. The next expansion of NATO does not make our continent more stable and more secure, end quote. I'm going to read the entirety of this first paragraph of the brief, and then I'm going to come back and give my thoughts on it so that it's slightly more cohesive. In a statement on Monday, the Russian Foreign Ministry said that the country, quote, will be forced to take retaliatory steps, both of a military, technical, and other nature, in order to stop the threats to its national security arising in this regard. President Ice Cream Grandpa has said that both Sweden and Finland, quote, have the full backing of the Estados Unidos. When asked if Biden was preparing in case Putin, or Vodka Grandpa, escalated the war because of this, the new White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, said, quote, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. By the way, she's terrible. You thought sake was bad? She's terrible. At least sake's a fun drink to enjoy with your tuna sashimi, right? This new lady, horrendous, my opinion. The opinions only. Good morning, Brian Barnes. So the new terrible lady, Karine Jean-Pierre, said, quote, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. We're going to focus on what's happening here and now, end quote. Director of the Russia Studies program at the think tank CNA said, quote, just because you haven't seen Russian cyber attacks or another form of retaliation against the United States in the war so far doesn't mean it won't happen. And that is the end of the first paragraph. Good morning, Michael Martinez. Let's talk about what the HE double hockey sticks is going on with Finland. So, we've been saying, Katie Lynn Stump, good morning. Bear Facts will be a couple of weeks. Other new exciting kid coming out next week. That's correct. Launching Monday on Patreon, Tuesday via the newsletter. On Wednesday, if there's any left, I'll let you know here on YouTube. So, it pays to be part of the Patreon family. You're up early. James, I'm up early every day, homeboy. I'm just up talking to you early. So here's what's going on with Finlandia. Is that a type of vodka? Am I like flashbacking 30 years ago to my heathen days? I think Finlandia is a type of vodka, right? Anyway, here's the deal. Finland and Russia share an incredibly long border. If Finland joins NATO, the amount of border that Russia shares with NATO will essentially double. Andrew Stanek, roger that, thank you. Tactical Combat Coffee Care, appreciate you. Shalom, Jeremiah. So Finland would double Russia's effective border with NATO. So think about span of control issues for Russia, right? They have twice as much border to police now. Additionally, the Khabadabada Peninsula, whose name escapes me right now, the Haro, I think it's the Haro Peninsula, far northern Russia, northwestern Russia, which butts up against Finland. There's some interesting things going on up there. Basically, the entirety of Russia's nuclear arsenal and almost the entirety of their ability to deliver that nuclear payload, aka their strategic bombers, is all positioned up there on that peninsula, right next door to Finland. And unconventional warfare, anybody? That peninsula is supplied by a single road, railway, and power line that's 700 kilometers long that runs through the piney woods. It is the perfect territory to do unconventional warfare stuff, to siege and sabotage and just make a mess of the logistics. It's, I mean, a couple of hood rats with some rucksacks could take out the roads, the bridges, the railroad tracks, and the power lines in a morning and isolate Russia's strategic bomber and nuclear capabilities about that fast. Gray says Choke Point Heaven. That's exactly right. And so I think that, or shall I say, possibilities here, Bear Nation, possibilities. If Finlandia Vodka joins the big HOA, NATO, like I said, that effectively doubles the amount of border that Russia shares with NATO. Span of control, that's a problem. And it also creates an excellent opportunity to isolate Russia's strategic bomber and nuclear capabilities. Oh, and Finlandia has, I believe it's 64 F-18s, and they're getting another 64 F-35s. Right? And let's just fly sorties over this 700-kilometer long corridor of isolation. Yeah. And so what does that do? And Finland has there's like 5.4 million people in Finland. They have they can produce a standing army of somewhere between 250 and 280,000 individuals. And they also have mandatory military service. So what that means is that they can call up an additional 900,000 reservists about that fast. Yeah, winter war, anyone? Exactly, James. That's exactly right. And so Finland is not a nothing burger when it comes to joining NATO. They represent a significant problem for the Russians. A significant problem for the Russians. And so there's actually a stroke of strategic brilliance in this. Who gives Russia any right to tell other nations what groups they can join? Might makes right. That's what does. What it is the penultimate threat of, do you want to be radioactive, bro? That's basically what it comes down to. Do you want your people to be able to eat? Do you want to be able to engage in commerce? Do you want fuel oil? Do you want heat? Do you want energy? Or do you want to be radioactive? By the way, the United States essentially does the same thing. China is kind of doing the same thing with its Belt and Road Initiative. It's sooner or later you become a big enough kid on the block that you get to tell people we're either going to be friends or enemies, and it's in your best interest that we're friends. The problem is you have to be able to back those words up with actions. And Russia's not looking so hot in Ukraine right now. I mean, there's lots of reports on fake reactive armor on their tanks, non-existent or faux, knockoff body armor that their soldiers are wearing. I mean, they're running AK-74s with iron sights on them in Ukraine, these conscripts that Russia has sent in there. Not even AK-12s, no optics, no, you're talking a 74, a 50-year-old rifle. Oh, the AK is the ultimate combat rifle. Okay, whatever, homeboy. Thank you, Michael Martinez. Point here being, Russia's ability to exert influence might actually be less than what they say it is. In other words, their mouth might be writing checks that their ass can't cash. And strategically, getting Finland involved in the big HOA ties up Russia, or could very much so tie up Russia. Why? Because our generals, our admirals, our top dogs in the DOD have basically said, look, we don't have the capacity, the capability to prosecute a two-front war currently. And we all know China's coming. China's coming like a freight train. The wheels might be about to fall off the freight train. They're running out of coal. There's very little steam coming out of the boiler, and half the people on board the train are sick. And 1/5 of the rail cars haven't shown up to port yet. But they're still coming. The train's still coming. And so if we lock up, we, NATO, and when I say we, I typically mean the people that I love here in Eastern Oklahoma. I no longer really identify as a hardcore American. I love what America was. What we are now, absolutely not. If you think it's a good idea to do all these things that the radical leftists now associate with being an American, I want to stomp your face into a curb. But you know, this is just me pontificating. Hypothetically, I would never actually do that. That would be a terrible thing to do to somebody. Point here being, big we, the NATOs, the Americas, if Finlandia joins the big HOA, that ties up Russia, or that has the capability to significantly tie up Russia in Eastern Europe. So, that if we tie up Russia in Eastern Europe, that gives us a greater capacity in the Indo-Pacific region. All that, do you always get up this earlier? P. Clodius, it depends. 2 nights ago, I barely slept. I was basically up just all night. But this is not, it's the Bear Show, but we're not here to talk about Bear. We're here to talk about what's happening in the world so that you guys can get off your asses and make moves that actually matter so that you don't become irradiated. Okay? So, all that to say, I think there's a potential stroke of strategic brilliance with bringing Finland into the big HOA. To say nothing of Sweden. Sweden's no slacker either, and they are right next door to Finland. And so if you think about, you have to constitute a reserve, right? And so if you're going to open up a 1,000-kilometer long front with Russia, with Finland, you've got the Swedes over here that can constitute a reserve for Finlandia, and now all of a sudden, we've got some actual potential to raise some havoc and mayhem up there in the Halabada Peninsula where, apologies, I'm fairly well researched on this, but not 100% researched on it. But to raise some hell on that peninsula where Russia has their strategic bombers and their nuclear weapons. Tracking? Tracking like a tank, Bear. All right, let's move along. We're 13 minutes into this damn brief already. Because all 30 NATO member countries must approve an application to the organization, there may be a snag. President Erdogan of Turkey, why is Turkey even in NATO? But anyway, has said that he would not approve the applications of Finland and Sweden due to their support for Kurdish organizations that are considered threats to the country. The, is it PPK or PKK? Basically considered a domestic terrorist group by Turkey that is funded overtly and covertly through tax dollars from Sweden and Finland. But the thing is, there's not much of a political ramification for Finland and Sweden to just quit funding those people. So it would be quite easy for the powers that be in Finland and Sweden to say, hey, no more kopecks or whatever the friggin' currency from Sweden is. No more kopecks, no more snowballs for y'all. Go away. Then Erdogan gets that concession that he doesn't have, homegrown domestic terrorism being funded by outside nations in his country. Win-win. Then Sweden gets on board. So you probably see some concessions regarding that. No monkeypox is not on my radar. I live in Eastern Oklahoma, bro. There's no monkeys here. There's barely people here. Praise Yah. There's barely people here. If you live in a place where monkeypox is a significant concern for you, you need to go to the nearest U-Haul. You need to take your wallet and throw it at the guy behind the counter and start screaming, give me everything I need to leave. and then throw all your shit in the U-Haul and drive as far as you can towards the center of the country, and where the wheels fall off of the U-Haul, that's where you live now. Okay, you roll up the back door of the U-Haul, you take the stuff out of the back of the U-Haul, you put your bed and your refrigerator and your couch in the U-Haul, you put a tarp over everything else, then you plant a garden, then you build a barn, then you build a house, and then boom, homestead. Let's see. In the last few weeks, reports have continually emphasized that jobless claims are rising and productivity is falling at the fastest pace in 74 years. That's awesome. Let's read that again. Here's another threat indicator for y'all. In the last few weeks, reports have continually emphasized that jobless claims are rising and productivity is falling at the fastest pace in 74 years. Awesome. Also, encouraged that there's 600 of y'all on at 6 o'clock in the morning. Bless y'all. In the first quarter, compensation for workers in the U.S. had its biggest increase in over 3 decades. But wages are still being devoured by inflation. People making minimum wage are depending on food stamps to survive. Oh, and if you don't think that that's not going to keep going, when it comes to actual bread lines and rationing, and you want to make sure that your people stay fed because you didn't do your due diligence now, you didn't put up food like me and every other friggin' prepper channel's been telling you for years to do, you didn't do any of this stuff. Now you're standing in the bread line and they're gonna say, hey man, you gotta do these 2 things and this other thing. I don't really want to do that, but I'm gonna do it. Okay. Also, selective service, you know that? Oh yeah, I signed up for that when I was 18. Yeah, cool, we extended that. It's no longer 35, it's 65. And give us one of your sons for the cause. Whoa, wait a minute. Do you want to starve? No, I've got a wife to feed. All right, here's your bucket of gruel. Give me your oldest son. Or your daughter. 2 p.m. in Qatar. Nice. Right. Get your boots off the desk. And empty the damn waste paper basket. Let's see. People making minimum wage are depending on food stamps to survive. Recently, first-time jobless claims have spiked to their highest level since earlier this year, 218,000 to be exact. The stock market has tumbled dramatically. In the words of Fed Chair Jerome Powell, quote, "The labor market is extremely tight and inflation is much too high." No shit, homie. Earlier this month, Sarah House, senior economist at Wells Fargo, said, "There is no getting around the fact that the tight state of the labor market has pushed real labor costs for employers well above levels consistent with the Fed's 2% inflation goal." As somebody who owns businesses that has laborers, let me tell you something. I saw our labor numbers last month, and this part of my head almost blew off of this part of my head. There were some conversations. Make no mistake, I love our people, but I was like, what happened here? Yeah. You know what happened here? We wanted to make American-made, handmade, guaranteed forever kits for y'all so that you wouldn't die. Like, not when the Panamanian paratroopers invade with their AK-12s and their Dragunov STV sniper rifles. No, when you wreck your friggin' minivan because statistically you're gonna be involved in a wreck once every 5 years in America. You know, like real shit. Yeah, that's why we have laborers. Yeah, so there is no getting around the fact that the tight state of the labor market has pushed real labor costs for employers well above levels consistent with the Fed's 2% inflation goal. Yeah, 2% inflation. That's cute. How about we multiply that by a factor of 10 and we might be getting close to where we actually are. Wife hit a deer this morning, Dallows Flowers. I hope she's okay. It's again, like if you wear a plate carrier for a living, you better understand that you need a blowout kit. The problem is that most people don't understand that if you have blood in your body and you are currently breathing, you have respirations. That is indicative of the fact that you are in fact alive and therefore need a trauma kit so that you can stay alive if somehow the blood starts leaking out of your body and or your respirations stop or are hindered. Like it's basic human stuff. Keep the blood inside the body. Make sure we keep oxygenating and circulating the blood. It's super simple. But you're like, I'm not a law enforcement officer. I'm not a Marine Space Recon Delta Force Space Ranger. I don't need one of those things. Yeah, if you have blood in your body, you need a trauma kit. Gray, the human body is far more fragile than people choose to recognize. Amen, bro. Amen. And once you've seen the twisted, disemboweled wreckage of what used to be a human body, you realize pretty quick, shit, I should probably have some tools in my toolkit to be able to deal with stuff like this. But I digress. The Fed's inflation goal of 2% is a joke. Labor costs are homegrown and the signal that the Fed still has significant work to do in bringing down inflation, said Wells Fargo Sarah House, the senior economist at Wells Fargo. According to current data, factory output in the mid-Atlantic region of the U.S. has decelerated much more than anticipated. Yay! According to a regional Federal Reserve survey, business outlook for the next half a year are the weakest they have been in over 13 years. World stocks have seen the worst start to any year on record. What else? Average U.S. gas prices just hit another new record high, largely driven by sky-high crude oil prices. While all of this feels like old news, this is a worsening of what has already been taking place. Now, if you're on Patreon, you have the links to the brief. If you're not on Patreon, you don't. This brief today, like I said, is recon by fire. We are going to see what happens. How many more community guidelines strikes can I get today for using my mouth and my brain at the same time on this telephonic device? We'll find out. And that will dictate how we proceed going forward. Where the brief lives, what we do, so forth and so on. So, we'll see. But I absolutely appreciate the patrons. I appreciate everybody in the Bear Nation, but we have to understand business is business. We have operating costs, and those costs are offset by the economic engine of the Bear Nation, which is Patreon. There's a link in the description. You can go check it out if you want. And it's not an I love me, you should love me too channel. I'm a busted up piece of shit. I don't love me all that much most days, but I do provide a shit ton of value over there at Patreon, and so if you want some extra value, you can check that out. Also, refugemedical.com, the building of which I'm sitting in front of right now, because sometimes you just need to go for a drive at 5 a.m. We make the best first aid kits on the face of the earth, bar none. You find me a better kit, I'll admit it. I haven't seen one yet. That's why I started the company. It's because everybody else's first aid kits and trauma kits suck shit. And I'm tired of good people dying, and I needed good kits for myself. After I developed those kits, I sent them to some SF friends and some Air Force PJ friends, and they were like, these things are amazing. We want more. Oh, I had no intent to make more than the 6 that I made for myself. Nope, they wanted more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And so the long and short is, if our kits are good enough for people that go into harm's way to protect your freedoms every day, they're good enough for you. Our vehicle kit is good enough for 1,000-mile races at 140 miles an hour in the Baja Desert. It's probably good enough for your minivan or your Jeep. There's awesome pictures of Bearfax hanging on the bulkheads inside of helicopters. Probably good enough for your office or your cubicle or your school bus. So, handmade, made in America, guaranteed forever. You guys know that. Your promo code's Bear Nation for free shipping on everything in the store. And frankly, if it's in the store today, you should go get it, because you are not the only one being affected by supply chain. And like I said, we got a new kit dropping Monday that will drop on Patreon first, on Monday, newsletter on Tuesday, and then if there's any left over, I'll tell you about it on Wednesday here on YouTube. But in the meanwhile, get your bleeding control kits, get your airway modules, get whatever you can get at Refuge Medical, because, you know, I could get hit by a bus later today and no new kit on Monday. Anyway, I appreciate y'all. Thank you for being here at the early show. Hey, do me a favor. Keep me in your prayers. Experiencing a little bit of overwhelm. There's 1,000 things to do, and the prioritize and execute game is pretty stiff right now. And you know, this thing happens when you got 27 plates spinning in the air. You have to be okay with dropping 15 of them so you can keep 12 of them in the air. I don't like dropping plates. So thank you, the bitter critter. Y'all have a fabulous day. Tremendous, believe it. I'm gonna go do some other shit. I don't know what yet. Bless y'all. Shalom.